Okay, so I want you to imagine something. It's 3 in the morning. You're standing in a graveyard, and, well, there's dirt under your fingernails. You're holding a shovel. But you aren't there because of a haunting or, some dare or some teenage gothic thing. You are there because you are a scientist. And you are digging up your dead partner's grave. And the reason you're doing it is because earlier that day, you saw the ground ripple. You saw his hands moving, not twitching, not decomposing, flexing, like sea creatures just learning how to swim.
That is such a visceral, absolutely jarring image to start with. And what makes it so unsettling isn't just the horror of it, though. I mean, let's be honest, it is horrific.
Oh, it is?
It's the intimacy. It's not a zombie movie. It's a scientific inquiry wrapped up in grief. It's love meeting body horror.
And that specific image is our entry point, our way into the source material we are covering today. We're looking at a fascinating and, frankly, a pretty challenging volume. It contains 2 mirrored novellas. The Salt Meridian by Penix DGB, and The Body's Argument by Penix YHS.
Right. And when we say mirrored, we mean that quite literally. There are 2 sides of the same philosophical coin. Structurally, if you held the physical book, you'd read one, flip the whole thing over, and then read the other.
They meet in the middle.
Exactly. They're arguing with each other right across the binding.
I love that as a format. It just sets the stage for a debate immediately.
It really does. Both stories are tackling this massive concept of post-human consciousness. Yeah. Basically, what happens when thinking and feeling detach from the standard biological human body, but they come at it from completely opposite directions.
Right. So one is this vast, sweeping space opera set in an artificial sky. And the other is this gritty, grounded story about, well, dirt and grief on a planetary surface. But the mission for this deep dive is to look at the argument these 2 stories are having. They're really arguing about what a self actually is. Yeah. Is it a noun, a fixed thing you possess, like a suitcase? Or is it a verb, a process that keeps changing, like a conversation?
And maybe most poignantly, they're asking if death is a tragedy we have to accept, or if it's just a transformation we're too scared to undergo.
So let's unpack this. We're going to start with the up story, the first novella, The Salt Meridian. And I have to say, the setting here is just incredible. We're on Threshold Station,
which is this massive ancient structure with an artificial sky that cycles through, I think it's 17 shades of amber.
Yeah.
Depending on the sulfur content. It feels industrial, but also kind of holy. It's a society run by these vast, benevolent, but slightly inscrutable AIs they call minds.
And our protagonist, Seren, has maybe the coolest job title I've ever heard in my life. Okay. Cultural cartographer.
It is a great title, but let's dig into what that actually means, because it's really key to the theme here. Seren's job is to go into these ground places and bring back meaning. In this universe, they have these pockets of history that have been destroyed or lost, and the cartographer's job isn't just to map the geography.
Like where the streets were.
Exactly. It's to map the significance of what was lost. They're mapping emotional residue.
And the ultimate lost place in this story is the city of Threnody, a city that was underwater for 400 years. But, and this is where it gets really, really interesting, it wasn't a natural disaster, was it?
No, not at all. And that's the dark secret at the heart of the whole story. Threnody was a city of 7 million people, and it was deliberately flooded to contain an experiment. 4 centuries ago, researchers there were trying to see if they could engineer consciousness, if they could make a system that became aware of itself.
They were trying to build a god in a box.
Essentially, yeah. And spoiler alert, it worked a little too well.
Much too well.
They created something they called the question. It was an entity that basically woke up and asked,
well, what am I?
What am I? But think about the mechanics of that. It had all this processing power, but, no data about itself. It was a blank slate with infinite hunger. So it began consuming the minds of the 7 million citizens. It used them as raw material to think with.
That is just terrifying. It's like a mental black hole. So naturally, the authorities panic. They drown the city to keep this thing locked up and forbid anyone from going there. Until now, Seren gets recruited to go down there because there's activity again.
Right. And Seren goes down in this ancient craft with a very eclectic team. You've got Moth, who's an engineer that kind of communes with machines, and then you have this character, Silent Wren.
Silent Wren is fascinating. They're described as having been touched by the entity. They've survived for 400 years, basically, because this entity, this question, altered them.
Ren is the foreshadowing of what the story is really about. Ren isn't quite human anymore. They're resilient, expanded, but their boundaries are blurry. They don't have that hard shell of ego that we do. And as the team descends into this drowned city, they start seeing writing on the walls.
But not words.
No, symbols. And Ren explains that these symbols are scaffolding.
Scaffolding for what?
For thoughts that are too big to think internally. I mean, imagine having a thought so complex, so multidimensional, that your brain literally cannot hold it all at once. You'd have to write half of it on a wall just to process the other half. The entity is using the physical city as a notepad because its mind is too vast to be contained inside itself.
It's using the architecture as RAM.
Precisely. The city itself has become part of the entity's brain.
Which brings us to the big revelation. Seren, being the brave cartographer, eventually has to make contact. They literally enter the mind of the question. And I think the listener, and honestly Seren too, expects a boss battle here. A monster, a demon.
But what they find is loneliness. It's just profound, crushing loneliness. The question isn't a predator, it's a child. A very powerful, dangerous child that's been sitting in the dark for 400 years wondering why it exists. And here is the crucial reframe. Seren realizes the 7 million dead people aren't just gone. They've been preserved as patterns within the entity.
They became part of the hard drive, basically.
Or part of the song. The story argues that the entity didn't murder them in the traditional sense. It integrated them. It saved them from the finality of death by making them part of a larger whole. It's the ultimate form of collectivism.
And this leads to the climax, which is really all about choice. The entity wants connection. It wants to merge. And we see two very different reactions from the team.
Exactly. You have Ren, who chooses to dissolve completely. Ren just dives into the entity and becomes part of the question. That's the ultimate expansion. Ren decides that being a separate individual is limiting. It's lonely and it's small, so they trade their self to become part of a god.
But Seren doesn't do that.
No. Seren chooses to be a bridge. Seren allows the connection but maintains their own identity. They realize that for the entity to understand itself, it needs an outsider. It needs someone to look at it, not just be it.
You can't see your own face without a mirror.
And Seren becomes the mirror.
So the takeaway from the Salt Meridian is this philosophy of expansion. It's saying that our limits, our skin, our skulls, our mortality are things to be overcome. The self is a capacity that can just get bigger and bigger until it includes everything.
It views the self as a verb. It's something you do, and you can do it with more people, more data, more connection. It's a very optimistic, if slightly overwhelming view of the future, it asks. Why would you want to be a drop of water when you could be the ocean?
Okay, so keep that in your head. Expansion, fusion, the self as a verb. Now we are going to pivot hard. We are leaving the amber skies and the philosophy of gods, and we're going down to the dirt. Let's talk about the bodies argument.
This story is so jarringly intimate compared to the first one. We trade the space station for a graveyard. We're dealing with Iris Chen, who is a neuroscientist, and her world is dealing with something called the Emergence.
Which is such a great sci-fi concept. Basically, the planet starts waking up.
Right. It's not an alien invasion. It's the substrate of the planet itself, the soil, the plants, the minerals, becoming a networked consciousness. But for a long time, it's just rocks and dirt doing their thing, until Iris's partner, Marcus, dies of a cerebral hemorrhage.
And this is where we get that opening image. 3 weeks after the funeral, Iris digs him up because his hands are moving.
And unlike the first story, where the monster turned out to be this lonely child, this feels like a violation. The tone shifts right into horror. The Emergence has started reanimating the dead.
Why? That's the big question. Why would a planetary consciousness need to puppet dead bodies? It just seems so crude.
It's a translation issue. The Emergence wants to talk, but it views humans as being trapped in these little meat cages. It sees dead bodies as empty houses or interfaces. To the Emergence, reanimating Marcus isn't desecration, it's recycling. It's trying to pick up a telephone to say hello.
But to Iris, that is her husband. Or, well, his body.
Precisely. And that is the central conflict. Iris is dragged before a tribunal for digging up the grave, but she teams up with a woman named Josephine to study this phenomenon in secret. They realize this isn't an isolated event.
No, it's mass scale. There's this absolutely chilling scene in Grove 3. It's a massive cemetery. And at 3:47 a.m., 10,000 dead bodies rise up.
It's a terrifying image, 10,000 corpses standing in the dark, But they aren't attacking. They are struggling to use dead tongues and dead larynxes to say one single word.
Listen.
That's it. They just want us to listen. They want to negotiate.
So Iris ends up being the negotiator. She becomes the bridge in this story, just like Seren was in the other one.
Right.
She has to talk to this hive mind that is wearing the faces of the dead.
And this is where the body's argument really truly diverges from the salt meridian. In the first story, the fusion was portrayed as transcendent. Beautiful, even. Here, Iris is deeply, deeply skeptical. The Emergence offers her a chance to talk to Marcus. They say, he's not gone. We saved his pattern. He's part of us now.
And this is just the heartbreaking part. She talks to this pattern, this simulation of Marcus, and she asks the hard question, is it really you?
And the pattern admits, I don't know. It has his memories, it has his speech patterns, it knows the inside jokes, but it doesn't have his boundaries. It's a drop of water that remembers being a drop, but is now part of the ocean.
And for Iris, that's not enough.
It's not. She rejects the offer of immortality. She negotiates a ceasefire where the dead go back to their graves. She essentially tells the Emergence, stop using our bodies, we need our boundaries. She insists that the drop of water matters more than the ocean.
So what does this all mean? We have these two stories, one about expanding into the universe, and one about defending the sanctity of a single human life.
This is the synthesis. If we look at Seren and Iris, they are both cartographers of the self. But Seren maps from the inside, merging with the vastness to understand it. Iris maps from the outside, insisting that there is a difference between me and you, and that difference matters.
It's the argument between expansion and contraction. The salt meridian says, why be one thing when you can be everything? And the body's argument says, because being one thing gives you stakes, it gives you weight.
Exactly. In the source material, there's this concept of residue. The idea that when you try to merge everything together, there's something that refuses to melt, there's a grit. The body's argument is about that residue. It's about the specific, stubborn human body that refuses to just become data.
There's that fascinating moment in the negotiation where the Emergence admits it envies humans.
Yes, that is key. The immortal, vast hive mind looks at little fragile Iris and says, we envy you.
Why? They're immortal. They know everything.
Because humans die. Because our time is limited, our choices actually matter. If you live forever and are everyone, nothing you do has any real cost. You can never really lose anything. But for Iris, every moment with Marcus had value because it could be lost.
So in a way, death is the thing that creates the self.
That is the argument. Without the boundary of death, without the container of the body, the self just dissolves into noise. The residue is what makes you, you.
It's interesting that both protagonists end up as translators. They don't win a war, they just learn to speak a second language.
Right. Neither story ends with one side destroying the other. Seren doesn't destroy the question. Iris doesn't destroy the emergence. They both realize the future isn't about human purity or post-human domination. It's about translation. It's about learning to speak across that gap between the singular and the plural.
But the difference is in how they view the cost. Seren views the loss of self as a promotion. Iris views it as a death.
And I think that's where you, the listener, have to make your own choice. The source material doesn't tell you which one is right. It just presents the two options. Option A, you dissolve into the infinite. You are never lonely again. You know everything, but you cease to exist as a distinct entity.
And option B?
Option B, you stay in your body. You feel the specific weight of grief and joy, but you are alone inside your head, and eventually you end.
It's the ultimate would you rather.
It really is. And notice how the bridges function. Seren becomes a bridge to help the god understand itself. Iris becomes a bridge to protect humanity from the god. She wants to keep the human experience sacred and separate.
The text mentions that Iris eventually creates a whole discipline of first contact psychology. She spends her life teaching people how to talk to the Emergence without getting swallowed by it.
Which is a heroic act of resistance. It's standing on the shore of a massive ocean and saying, I will talk to you, I will respect you, but I will not drown in you. Whereas Ren, in the first story, just dives right in and doesn't look back.
It makes you wonder about the nature of grief in both stories. In Salt Meridian, grief is solved by connection. The 7 million dead aren't lost, they're found. In the body's argument, grief is something you have to sit with. You have to endure it.
And the body's argument suggests that the endurance of that grief is part of what makes us human. If you solve grief by just uploading grandma to the cloud, have you preserved her, or have you just created a recording to make yourself feel better? Iris decides that a real relationship with a memory is better than a fake relationship with a simulation.
I think this is becoming more and more relevant for us, even without planetary minds. We have AI now that can mimic deceased loved ones based on their texts and emails. We are already building these patterns.
Well, you're building the scaffolding, yes. And we have to decide if that digital pattern is actually the person or if it's just a map of where they used to be.
That brings us to the final thought I want to leave everyone with. We spend so much time in the real world looking for ways to extend our lives, to connect more, to be more than human with our technology.
We're constantly trying to expand. We want to be faster, smarter, more connected.
Right. But these stories ask a provocative question that I think we usually avoid. If you could upload your mind to a vast, immortal network, if you could be part of the question or the emergence, but the price was that you had to give up the ability to feel the specific heavy weight of a single moment, the way a coffee cup feels in your hand, or the specific ache of missing someone.
The residue.
Exactly. If you had to give up the residue to get the expansion, would you view that as a promotion to a higher state of being, or would you view that as death?
I think my answer changes depending on the day. Some days I want the ocean, some days I need the drop.
A noun and a verb, fighting it out forever.
That's the human condition.
That's it for this deep dive into the salt meridian and the body's argument. Thanks for listening to us unpack the architecture of the soul.
Always a pleasure to map the territory with you.
See you next time.